senior squirrels and any juniors that might be joining. We'll go live in just a little while. I think it's about 2:15 or so on September 15th, Sunday. But before we do, I thought I'd go ahead and try to read earlier so I can hopefully get some stuff done. We'll see, some stitching done. Joe meets Apollyon, and I looked that up, and it's like now I forgot what it said. Sort of like a god of the underworld, maybe, I think. I forget now, but it's not a good thing. "Girls, where are you going?" asked Amy, coming into their room one Saturday afternoon and finding them getting ready to go out with an air of secrecy which excited her curiosity. "Never mind, little girls shouldn't ask questions," returned Joe sharply. "Now, if there's anything mortifying to our feelings when we are young, it is to be told that, and to be bidden to run away, dear. It's more than trying to us." Amy bridled up at the insult and determined to find out the secret if she teased for an hour. Turning to Meg, who never refused her anything very long, she said coaxingly, "Do tell me. I should think you might let me go too, for Beth is fussing over her dolls, and I haven't got anything to do, and I'm so lonely." "I can't, dear, because you aren't invited," began Meg. But Joe broke in impatiently. "Now, Meg, be quiet or you will spoil it all. You can't go, Amy, so don't be a baby and whine about it." "You're going somewhere with Laurie. I know you are. You were whispering and laughing together on the sofa last night, and you stopped when I came in. Aren't you going with him?" "Yes, we are. Now do be still and stop bothering." Amy held her tongue but used her eyes and saw Meg slip a fan into her pocket. I know. You're going to the theater to see The Seven Castles," she cried, adding resolutely, "and I shall go, for Mother said I might see it, and I've got my rag money, and it was mean not to tell me in time." "Just listen to me a minute and be a good child," said Meg soothingly. "Mother doesn't wish you to go this week because your eyes are not well enough yet to bear the light of this fairy piece. Next week you can go with Beth and Hannah and have a nice time." "I don't like that half as well as going with you and Laurie. Please let me. I've been sick with this cold so long and shut up. I'm dying for some fun." "Do, Meg. I'll be ever so good," pleaded Amy, looking as pathetic as she could. "Suppose we take her. I don't believe Mother would mind if we bundle her up well," began Meg. "If she goes, I shan't. And if I don't, Laurie won't like it. And it will be very rude after he invited only us to go and drag in Amy. Only us to go and drag in Amy. I should think she'd hate to poke herself where she isn't wanted," said Joe crossly, for she disliked the trouble of overseeing a fidgety child when she wanted to enjoy herself. Her tone and manner angered Amy, who began to put her boots on, saying in her most aggravating way, "I shall go. Meg says I may, and if I pay for myself, Laurie hasn't anything to do with it." "Well, you can't sit with us, for our seats are reserved, and you mustn't sit alone, so Laurie will give you his place, and that will spoil our pleasure. Or he'll get another seat for you, and that isn't proper when you aren't asked. You shan't stir a step, so you may stay where you are," scolded Joe, crosser than ever, having just pricked her finger in her hurry. Sitting on the floor with one boot on, Amy began to cry, and Meg to reason with her when Laurie called from below, and the two girls hurried down, leaving their sister wailing. For now and then she forgot her grown-up ways and acted like a spoiled child. Just as the party were setting out, Amy called out over the banisters in a threatening voice, "You'll be sorry for this, Joe March. See if you ain't." "Fiddlesticks," returned Joe, slamming the door. Uh-oh. They had a charming time, For the 7 castles of the Diamond Lake were as brilliant and wonderful as a heart could wish. But in spite of the comical red imps, sparkling elves, and gorgeous princes and princesses, Joe's pleasure had a drop of bitterness in it. The fairy queen Jelly Curls reminded her of Amy, and between the acts she amused herself with wondering what her sister would do to make her sorry for it. She and Amy had had many likely skirmishes in the course of their lives, for both had quick tempers and were apt to be violent when fairly roused. Amy teased Joe, and Joe irritated Amy, and semi-occasional explosions occurred, of which both were much ashamed afterward. Although the oldest, Meg had the least self-control and had hard times trying to curb the fiery spirit which was continually getting her into trouble. Her anger never lasted long, and having humbly confessed her fault, she sincerely repented and tried to do better. Her sisters used to say that they rather liked to get Jo into a fury because she was such an angel afterward. Poor Jo tried desperately to be good, but her bosom enemy was always ready to flame up and defeat her, and it took years of patient effort to subdue it. When they got home, they found Amy reading in the parlor. She assumed an injured air as they came in, never lifted her eyes from the book, or asked a single question. Perhaps curiosity might have conquered resentment if Beth had not been there to inquire, and received a glowing description of that play. On going up to put away their best hat, Joe's first look was toward the bureau, for in their last quarrel, Amy had soothed her feelings by turning Joe's top drawer upside down on the floor. Everything was in its place, however, and after a hasty glance into the various closets, bags, and boxes, Joe decided that Amy had forgiven and forgotten her wrongs. Do you think so? There Joe was mistaken, for the next day she made a discovery which produced a tempest. Meg, Beth, and Amy were sitting together late in the afternoon when Joe burst into the room, looking excited and demanding breathlessly, "Has anyone taken my story?" I remember this from the movie. Meg and Beth said no at once and looked surprised. Amy poked the fire and said nothing. Joe saw her color rise and was down upon her in a minute. "Amy, you've got it." "No, I haven't." "You know where it is then." "No, I don't." "That's a fib," cried Joe, taking her by the shoulders and looking fierce enough to frighten a much braver child than Amy. "It is, and I haven't got it. Don't know where it is now, and don't care." "You know something about it. You'd better tell at once, or I'll make you," and Joe gave her a slight shake. "Scold as much as you like. You'll never get your silly old story again," cried Amy, getting excited in her turn. "Why not?" "I burnt it up." "What?" "My little book I was so fond of and worked over and meant to finish before Father got home. Have you really burnt it?" said Joe, turning very pale while her eyes kindled and her hands clutched Amy nervously. "Yes, I did. I told you I'd make you pay for being so cross yesterday, and I have, too." Amy got no further, for Joe's hot temper mastered her, and she shook Amy till her teeth chattered in her head, crying in a passion of grief and anger, "You wicked, wicked girl! I never can write it again, and I'll never forgive you as long as I live." Meg flew to rescue Amy and Beth to pacify Joe, but Joe was quite beside herself, and with a parting box on her sister's ear, she rushed out of the room up to the old sofa in the garret and finished her fight alone. The storm cleared up below, for Mrs. March came home, and having heard the story, soon brought Amy to a sense of the wrong she had done to her sister. Joe's book was the pride of her heart and was regarded by her family as a literary sprout of great promise. It was only a half-dozen little fairy tales, but Jo had worked over them patiently, putting her whole heart into her work, hoping to make something good enough to print. She had just copied them with great care and had destroyed the old manuscript, so that Amy's bonfire had consumed the loving work of several years. It seemed a small loss to others, but to Jo it was a dreadful calamity, and she felt that it never could be made up to her. Beth mourned as for a parted kitten, and Meg refused to defend her pet. Mrs. March looked grave and grieved, and Amy felt that no one would love her till she had asked pardon for the act which she now regretted more than any of them. When the tea bell rung, Jo appeared, looking so grim and unapproachable that it took all Amy's courage to say meekly, "Please forgive me, Jo. I'm very, very sorry." "I shall never forgive you," was Jo's stern answer, and from that moment she ignored Amy entirely. No one spoke of the great trouble, not even Mrs. March, for all had learned by experience that when Jo was in that mood, words were wasted, and the wisest course was to wait till some little accident or other generous nature softened Jo's resentment and healed the breach. It was not a happy evening, for though they sewed as usual, while their mother read aloud from Bremer, Scott, or Edgeworth, something was waiting, and on the Sweet Home piece was disturbed. They felt this most when singing time came, for Beth could only play. Jo stood dumb as a stone, and Amy broke down. So Meg and Mother sung alone. But in spite of their efforts to be as cheerful as larks, the flute-like voices did not seem to chord as well as usual, and all felt out of tune. As Jo received her good-night kiss, Mrs. March whispered gently, "My dear, don't let the sun go down upon your anger. Forgive each other, help each other, and begin again tomorrow." Jo wanted to lay her head down on that motherly bosom and cry her grief and anger all away, but tears were an unmanly weakness, and she felt so deeply injured that she really couldn't quite forgive yet. So she winked hard, shook her head, and said gruffly, because Amy was listening, "It was an abominable thing, and she doesn't deserve to be forgiven." With that, she marched off to bed, and there was no merry or confidential gossip that night. Amy was much offended that her overtures of peace had been repulsed, and began to wish she had not humbled herself, to feel more injured than ever, and to plume herself on her superior virtue in a way that was particularly exasperating. Jo still looked like a thundercloud, and nothing went well all day. It was bitter cold in the morning. She dropped her precious turnover in the gutter. Aunt March had an attack of fidgets. Meg was pensive. Beth would look grieved and wistful when she got home, and Amy kept making remarks about people who were always talking about being good, and yet they wouldn't try when other people set them a virtuous example. Everybody is so hateful. I'll ask Laurie to go skating. He's always kind and jolly, and will put me to rights. "I know," said JoJo to herself, and off she went. Amy heard the clash of skates and looked out with an impatient exclamation. "There, she promised I should go next time, for this is the last ice we shall have, but it's no use to ask such a cross patch to take me." "Don't say that. You were very naughty, and it's hard to forgive the loss of her precious little book, but I think she might do it now, and guess she will if you try her at the right minute," said Meg. Go after them. Don't say anything till Joe has got good-natured with Laurie. Then take a quiet minute and then just kiss her or do some kind thing, and I'm sure she'll be friends again with all her heart. I'll try, said Amy, for the advice suited her, and after a flurry to get ready, she ran after her friends, who were just disappearing over the hill. Ooh, I think I'm going to have to stop there, guys. There's not a whole lot more, but my brother's at the door. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Love